Tonight we are leaving behind the comforts of your soft mattress and the gentle glow of a screen. We are traveling back, over 2,000 years, to a place where the air smells of dust, ink, and smoldering lamp oil. You are not an emperor, a general, or a philosopher. Your destiny is far more fundamental, and in many ways, far more exhausting. You are a clerk in the service of the Han Dynasty, and your empire is built not on stone, but on bamboo. All around you, in the dim light of a frontier outpost or a provincial office, are stacks upon stacks of wooden and bamboo slips. These are the vertebrae of the state. Every troop movement, every tax payment, every legal judgment, every grain shipment is recorded here by your hand. Your back aches, your fingers are stained, and the work is never, ever done. You are the human engine in a vast, silent machine of information, and you probably won't survive this without at least one major case of writer's cramp. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The journey doesn't start with a brush in your hand, but with an axe in a forest. Before a single character can be written, the material must be harvested. You don't get nice, flat sheets, you get tough, cylindrical bamboo stalks. Your first task, often delegated to conscripted laborers or junior apprentices, is to cut these stalks into uniform lengths, typically about 23 centimeters long for standard documents, roughly the length of a modern ruler. This wasn't arbitrary. It was a practical length for holding in one hand while writing with the other. Then comes the brutal part, splitting. With a heavy knife, you score the hard, jointed stalk and then, with a practiced twist, split it along the grain into strips. Wider strips for important edicts, narrower ones for lists and memos. Your world is filled with the sound of cracking bamboo. But you're not done. A fresh bamboo slip is slick and waxy, resistant to ink. So, you have to prepare it. The most common method? Fire. You hold a bundle of green slips over a flame, carefully scorching the surface. This does two things. It kills any insects or larvae that might be hiding inside, a crucial step for preservation, and, more importantly, it sweats out the natural oils. The heat brings beads of moisture to the surface. This is called killing the blue or driving out the sweat. It's a smoky, smelly process that leaves your eyes stinging and your clothes reeking of campfire. Once cooled, the surface is dry, slightly textured, and perfectly willing to accept ink. For finer wood, like pine or poplar, you might use a plane to create a smooth writing surface. Every slip is a tiny battlefield where nature is subdued to serve the administration. Now, imagine the sheer scale. A single report might take dozens of these slips, tied together. A comprehensive register of a county's households? Hundreds. An archive? Hundreds of thousands. Historians have unearthed entire treasure troves, like the over 20,000 slips found at the Jian site in the deserts of Inner Mongolia. This was a frontier garrison, and every slip, from duty rosters to horse inventories, was a piece of the empire's pulse. Your entire professional life is defined by this one, humble object. You don't dream in grand vistas, you dream in rectangular strips of bamboo. And you haven't even picked up a brush yet. You've just created the blank slate upon which the weight of imperial logistics will be pressed. The quiet, relentless work of turning a plant into a page is the unspoken foundation of it all. It's a mainstream historical fact we often overlook. The Han bureaucracy was arguably the world's first true data state, and its primary storage device was a piece of barbecued grass. Not all bamboo slips were bamboo. In resource-scarce areas, clerks got creative. Archaeologists have found slips made from discarded roof tiles, shaved animal bones, and even recycled wood from old carts or packaging. If it was flattish and could hold a scratch of ink, it was fair game. The empire demanded records, but it didn't always supply the ideal stationery. You made do. Historians still argue whether this resourcefulness was a sign of a stretched-thin local administration or simply the pragmatic, waste not want not attitude of a low-level clerk just trying to get through the day's paperwork. Either way, your first lesson is clear. The system is vast, but it runs on improvisation as much as regulation. You wipe the soot from your hands, take a deep breath of the smoky air, and turn to face the mountain of blank slips waiting on your desk. The real work is about to begin. Your desk is not a grand piece of furniture. It's a simple, sturdy wooden plank, perhaps set on trestles, positioned to catch the best light from a small window or a flickering oil lamp. Your chair is a stool. There is no ergonomic support, no comfortable cushion. This is where you will spend sunrise to sunset, and the tools laid out before you define your existence. There's the inkstone, a flat slab of stone with a depression to hold a few drops of water. Next to it, the ink stick, a solid cake of pine soot and animal glue. You pick it up and begin grinding, pressing it in slow, deliberate circles against the stone with a little water. It's a meditative, monotonous start to the day, the soft, gritty whisper of creation. The black paste that pools in the well is the lifeblood of the empire. You test its consistency with the tip of your brush. Too thin, and it will bleed into the bamboo grain, creating fuzzy, unprofessional characters. Too thick, and it will clog the brush and crack off the slip. It has to be just right. Then, the brushes themselves. You have a few, of different sizes and hairs. The finest, for the small, meticulous characters of official reports, might be made of weasel or rabbit hair, tied to a bamboo handle. They are precious. You treat them with care, shaping the tip with your lips before dipping it into the fresh ink. In your other hand, you hold a bamboo slip, its warm, fire-treated surface ready. You anchor your writing hand on the desk, steady your breathing, and begin. The script is not the beautiful, flowing cursive of a poet or scholar. It is lishu, clerical script. It's efficient, somewhat angular, designed for speed and legibility. Your wrist moves in quick, precise strokes. A horizontal line here, a sharp hook there, a dot. Each character is a tiny monument to clarity. You are not expressing yourself, you are transcribing reality. Private Jong, of the 3rd Cavalry Company, received his monthly grain allowance, 2 sure of millet. The words form in black, soaking into the pale bamboo, permanent. This is the core of your daily grind, relentless transcription. A courier arrives with a bundle of documents from the commandee capital. You untie the cord, scan the orders, and begin making copies. One for the garrison commander's file, one to be sent back as acknowledgement, one for the central archive. Every character must be perfect. A mistake in a number could mean a soldier goes hungry or a tax quota is missed. There is no delete key, no whiteout. Your focus is absolute. The world narrows to the strip of bamboo, the tip of your brush, and the pool of black ink. Your shoulders tense. After a few hours, a dull ache begins to bloom between your shoulder blades and creep down your forearm. You shake out your hand, flex your fingers, and keep going. The pile of blank slips to your right shrinks agonizingly slowly. The pile of written slips to your left grows, a miniature wall of recorded facts. A fly buzzes around your head. You ignore it. The scratch of your brush is the only sound that matters. The documents you handle are the mundane pulse of the empire. You compile rosters, names, ranks, dates of enlistment, dates of discharge, notes on promotions or infractions. You process requisitions, requests for arrows, for leather to repair saddles, for salt, for medicine. You record inventories, how many crossbows are in the army, how many sacks of grain are in the storehouse, how many horses are in the stables and the condition of their hooves. It is breathtakingly boring and critically important. One of the mainstream historical facts revealed by these slips is the astonishing depth of this oversight. At the Juyen garrison, they even kept records of the exact number of arrows each soldier fired during training exercises, noting which ones were lost or broken. The state wanted to account for every single resource, down to the last inch of bowstring. But within this dry river of data, there are occasional, startlingly human eddies. Complaints about the food. You might be copying a formal report when you find, tucked within or on a separate slip, a less formal note. A soldier griping that the millet is full of weevils. A clerk moaning about the quality of the salted vegetables. A request from a low-ranking officer for a transfer because the local ale is, and I quote from a real fragment, unfit for human consumption. These are the grumbles that slipped through, the tiny cracks in the imperial facade where you hear a real voice, tired and disgruntled, just like you. Historians still argue whether these informal notes were tolerated as a pressure valve for the ranks or if they were serious breaches of protocol that could get a clerk demoted to latrine duty. As you carefully copy another requisition for lamp oil, you can't help but smile at a splotch of ink on the original, the ghost of a colleague who sighed too heavily over his work. The grind connects you across the centuries. You straighten your back, grind a little more ink, and dive back into the endless stream of words, the silent, scribbling heartbeat of a dynasty. You finish the last slip of a report, blow gently on the ink to dry it, and lay it on the growing stack. Now comes the second part of the grind, one that tests your body as much as the writing taxed your mind, moving them. A completed set of documents, say, the monthly personnel report for your 100-man garrison, isn't a sheaf of paper. It's a stack of 30 or 40 bamboo slips. You gather them, aligning the edges neatly. Even this small bundle has a satisfying, solid heft in your hand, like a thin wooden brick. This is the basic unit of your world. But that's just one report. The real weight reveals itself when you have to file it. Your archive is not a library with airy shelves. It's a low, secure room, often partially underground or built with thick walls to regulate temperature and humidity. Along the walls are shelves, but more commonly, there are piles. Bundles of slips, each tied with cord, are stacked like lumber. To add a new bundle to a pile, you must first lift the ones on top. A full bundle of 100 slips can weigh over 2 kilograms. A stack of 10 such bundles is a back-straining lift. You are not a scribe now, you are a warehouse laborer. You bend your knees, get a good grip on the coarse cords, and heave. Dust, ancient and dry, puffs into the air, making you cough. The physicality is constant. Retrieving a record from 6 months ago means excavating it, bundle by heavy bundle. And the space. Oh, the space. Every slip, every bundle, occupies three-dimensional volume. A major administrative center's archive wasn't just a room, it was a cavernous hall filled with these wooden blocks of data. You don't walk through aisles, you navigate narrow canyons between teetering pillars of imperial memory. The air is still and smells of old wood, dust, and the faint, tangy scent of the insect-repelling herbs strewn in the corners. Light is precious and kept dim to reduce fire risk, so you squint at the tags hanging from bundles to find the one you need. It's a claustrophobic's nightmare. A mainstream historical fact we must confront is that the Han bureaucracy eventually produced so many records that it created its own existential storage crisis. Emperors would occasionally order weeding, the selective destruction of older, deemed non-essential records, just to make physical space for the new ones. You are literally drowning in information made manifest. This leads to the constant battle against entropy. A bundle stored on a damp floor will wick moisture. The bamboo will swell, then contract, cracking. Mold can bloom in the beautiful, subtle patterns of decay that will eat the characters right off the surface. Then there are the insects. Silverfish and bookworms don't care if the material is bamboo or papyrus. It's delicious cellulose. You learn to spot the telltale pinprick holes and the fine, powdery frost that means a colony is munching its way through a year's tax records. Your preservation techniques are physical and aromatic. You regularly rotate bundles, moving those from the bottom of a pile to the top. You use storage chests made of fragrant, insect-repelling woods like camphor or cedar when you can get it. You place packets of pungent herbs, mugwort, chrysanthemum, maybe some pepper, among the stacks. The archive doesn't smell like a museum. It smells like a spice shop fighting a losing battle against a lumberyard. Some of the most valuable finds for modern archaeologists are the discarded slips. When a bundle's cord broke and slips scattered, or when a record was officially weeded, the old, useless slips weren't just thrown away. Bamboo was a resource. They were often recycled as fuel, or as scrap wood for minor repairs. But sometimes, they were used as toilet paper, or more accurately, as personal hygiene sticks, known as cho. Archaeologists have to carefully distinguish between a historically significant administrative slip and a 2,000-year-old piece of scratchy bathroom material. It's the ultimate, humbling end for a piece of imperial data, from recording the emperor's decree to ensuring a soldier's posterior is clean. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of recycled slips in ancient latrine pits represents a deliberate, symbolic destruction of old authority or is just the simplest case of pragmatic reuse of available scrap wood. As you lug another bundle onto a high shelf, your muscles screaming, you might find the latter explanation perfectly reasonable. The weight of history isn't metaphorical here. It's in your aching arms, the dust in your lungs, and the very real fear that the whole precarious pile might choose today to give in to gravity. So, how do you find anything in this looming, dusty labyrinth? You don't just stack bundles at random. The empire's survival depends on retrieving information, sometimes with urgent speed. A legal dispute hinges on a land deed from 20 years ago. A supply officer needs last year's grain yield figures from a specific county. You can't spend days shifting mountains of bamboo. This is where the true genius, or the obsessive-compulsive madness, of the Han clerk comes into play. You impose order. Not with digital folders, but with notches, strings, tags, and an unshakable system. It starts with the individual slip. Before you even write the first character of a document, you might prepare the slip itself for filing. On the left or right edge of many slips, you'll find a small, carefully carved notch or a drilled hole. This isn't damage, it's architecture. This is where the binding cord will pass through. More importantly, for certain types of continuous records like calendars or ledgers, you'll create a mat by laying slips side by side and weaving cords through these pre-made holes, creating a fixed, fan-like sequence that can't be disordered. But for most documents, you write first, then bind. Once a set of slips for a single document is complete, you align them perfectly. Then, you take a strong cord, hemp or silk, and wrap it around the bundle, usually in two places. You tie it off with a specific knot, one that can be untied by an authorized person but won't come loose on its own. This cord is your first line of control. But a tight bundle is still anonymous. This is where the tag shines. A tag is a small, often triangular or rectangular piece of wood, slightly thicker than a slip. You drill a hole in its protruding end and thread it onto the binding cord of the bundle before you tie the final knot. Now it dangles from the bundle like a bookstore's price tag. On this tag, you write the essential metadata. Not the contents, but the identifier. You might inscribe, Personnel Reports, 4th month, Yongguang Reign Year 3, from Lian County. Or Legal Judgments, Case number 47, regarding Farmer Li and ox theft. The tag is the search engine result. When you need to find a bundle, You don't pull each one down and look at the first slip. You walk the canyons of stacks, gently flipping through the dangling tags with your fingers, reading their succinct summaries. It's a primitive, tactile database. In large archives, bundles on the same subject or from the same year were stored together in a designated area, often in wooden boxes or on specific shelves, with a master tag for the whole section. Your archive is a physical tree structure of information. The mainstream historical sophistication here is remarkable. They developed what scholars call vertical and horizontal filing. Vertical filing meant stacking bundles of related but sequential records, like the monthly reports from a single garrison, one on top of the other in chronological order. Horizontal filing meant placing bundles of similar record types from different places side by side, like all the land deeds from a commandery. You had to know the system's map. A misplaced bundle was a minor catastrophe. This rigid organization is why, when modern archaeologists find a cache, they can often reconstruct the original filing order from the position of the slips and the remnants of cords, rebuilding the ancient librarian's mind. Sometimes, the clerks got artistic or frustrated. While most tags are strictly professional, archaeologists have found tags with doodles, a little horse, a rough sketch of a face. Some have quick, personal notes on the back, like check figures with Clark Wang or urgent. One even had what looks like a practice attempt at a more elegant script, as if the clerk was doodling during a dull moment. These tiny acts of rebellion or personality on the tools of organization remind you that the system was run by humans, not robots. The tag was their interface, and sometimes they scuffed it with their own identity. Historians still argue whether this elaborate filing system was a top-down imposition from a centralized administration obsessed with control, or a bottom-up innovation that evolved naturally in local offices out of sheer, desperate necessity to manage the overwhelming flood of records. Was it the empire's will, or the clerk's clever survival instinct? As you finish tying a new bundle, carefully inscribing the tag with your sharp, clear clerical script, you feel a small spark of pride. You've taken chaos, a stack of individual slips, and transformed it into a findable, storable, manageable unit of knowledge. You place it in its designated box, its tag facing outwards. For now, order reigns. But the next courier is already at the gate, dismounting with a fresh satchel of reports. The chaos is always arriving. Your job is to never stop building the system that contains it. To write all these tags, reports, and ledgers, you didn't just learn to write, you learned a specific, state-sanctioned way of writing. Forget the elegant, complex seal script of the Han Dynasty before you, with its curves and pictorial hints. Your tool is Lishu, clerical script. And it's more than a font, it's a revolution in efficiency, the engine oil of the bureaucracy. Your hand doesn't dance across the bamboo. It marches, with a brisk, disciplined rhythm. This script is why you can keep up. Look at the characters you form. Clerical script is flatter, wider than its predecessors. The sweeping, circular motions of seal script are broken apart into distinct, separate strokes. A curved line becomes a horizontal one with a blunt, downward flick at the end, a feature called the silkworm head and wild goose tail. This isn't for beauty, it's for the brush. By lifting and pressing the brush in these specific ways, you create clear, legible characters with fewer continuous movements. It's faster. Your wrist learns the gestures like muscle memory. Press down for the thick head, drag the brush, then press and sweep out for the tail. It's almost mechanical. This script was born in the trenches of administration, likely evolving from the quick, abbreviated notes of low-level clerks who needed to jot things down now, not carve them for eternity. The state saw its utility and standardized it. Your handwriting is now an instrument of control. This standardization is a mainstream historical fact of immense importance. For the first time on such a scale, a person from the southern marshes could read a report written by a clerk in the northern deserts, because they were both using the same script. It unified the empire's communication in a way laws alone never could. It allowed for the mass training of clerks. You could be taught a consistent set of strokes. Accuracy in transcription was paramount, and a uniform script made checking for errors easier. When you write a number, there is no artistic flourish. The character 410 must look exactly like the 10 in the capitals copy. Your individuality is suppressed in service of clarity. Your mind becomes a channel for information, and your hand is the pump. But within this rigid framework, tiny moments of personality leak through. While you grind your own from a solid stick most days, for truly important or duplicate documents, you might use pre-made liquid ink stored in a small pottery jar. Analysis of inks on surviving slips shows fascinating variety. Some inks are simple pine soot and glue. Others, perhaps for more prestigious documents, have traces of lapis lazuli or other minerals, giving a slight sheen. Some clerks, it seems, even experimented with adding traces of oil or different binders to alter the flow or drying time. You might have a personal preference, a tiny rebellion in chemistry. A fellow clerk's reports might always dry with a slight gloss, yours might soak in matte and deep. The empire dictated the script, but you had a sliver of choice in the black blood you used to write it. And this brings us to a subtle but fierce scholarly debate that hums beneath your every stroke. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of clerical script and the explosion of bureaucracy created a new social class, the educated, non-noble clerk, or simply recognized and formalized a group that already existed. Were you, the skilled writer, a product of the hand system, lifted from obscurity by your useful talent? Or were you part of a pre-existing literate stratum that the dynasty desperately co-opted to run its machine? As your brush moves, forming perfect, identical characters for the 50th time today, the question hangs in the air. Are you a cog that was manufactured for this machine, or a pre-existing piece the machine was built around? The answer changes the story from one of top-down control to one of bottom-up necessity. Your wrist aches the same either way. You finish a long column of text, your brush moving with the unconscious grace of deep practice. The script is no longer something you think about, it's something you do, like breathing. You are a living part of a vast textual network, your hand translating the spoken orders, the observed events, the counted resources into the permanent, legible symbols that will allow a distant official to make a decision. You are not just writing words, you are performing the act of governance, one precise, horizontal stroke with a goose-tail flick at a time. The silence of the archive is broken only by the soft scratch scratch scratch, the sound of an empire writing itself into existence. Your brush slips. A tiny droplet of ink, like a malevolent black insect, lands on a character in the middle of a nearly completed slip detailing the inventory of crossbow bolts. It's not a smudge you can ignore, it obscures a number. Panic, cold and immediate, washes over you. This isn't paper. You can't blot it. The bamboo surface has drunk the ink in. Starting over means recopying the entire slip, wasting time and precious material. But you are not powerless. You reach not for another slip, but for your knife. This knife is your savior. It's not a weapon, it's a scribal tool, small, sharp, and sturdy, with a fine point. Every clerk has one. This is your undo button. You carefully lay the slip flat on your desk, steadying it with your other hand. Then, with the very tip of the blade, you begin to scrape. Gently, at first. You aren't trying to gouge the bamboo, just to lift the very top layer of fibers where the ink has settled. It's a delicate operation. Scrape too softly, and the black stain remains. Scrape too hard, and you'll create a divot, a weak spot that might crack later, or make the surface too rough to write over. You work with a surgeon's focus, the sound of faint, dry s. Slowly, the black flecks give way to the pale, golden brown of the bamboo beneath. You've removed the mistake. But you haven't finished. The scraped spot is now slightly fuzzy and raised. So you take a smooth, hard stone, a burnisher, and rub it over the area in small circles, pressing firmly. This compresses the fibers, smoothing the surface back to near perfection. You blow away the tiny black and tan dust. Now, you can rewrite the correct character in the freshly cleared space. The repair is visible if you look closely, a slightly different texture, a ghostly halo where the old ink seeped a fraction deeper, but it is officially correct. The record is saved. The knife has redeemed your error. This practice of scraping to correct, known as xiao, was a mainstream and essential technique. It speaks to the permanence and value of the bamboo itself. The slip was a physical resource, you didn't waste it. Corrections were expected and had a formal procedure. For more substantial changes, like altering a name or a date in a legal document, the correction might be noted in the margin or between the lines with a small mark called a ju, indicating the change was authorized. The knife gave the record a kind of fluidity within its solidity. It acknowledged that administration was a process, and processes involve revisions. Your toolkit, brush, ink, knife, burnisher, was a complete system for both creation and amendment. They weren't just for scraping bamboo. In a grimly practical twist, they also served as the ancient equivalent of a pencil sharpener for writing brushes. After heavy use, a brush tip would fray and lose its fine point. To restore it, you'd carefully trim the stray hairs with your knife. But the connection goes deeper. In some very rare and context-specific finds, small knives have been discovered in tombs buried alongside clerks, placed right next to their brushes and inkstones. This suggests the knife was seen not just as a tool, but as a core part of the clerk's professional identity, worthy of accompanying him into the afterlife. Imagine that, your eternal soul equipped to file celestial reports and correct heavenly accounting errors. It's a profound testament to how deeply the act of clerical work, with all its tiny corrections, was woven into a person's life. This necessity for correction opens a door to a fascinating historical debate. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of corrected slips, scraped numbers, altered names, marginal notes, is evidence of a careful, self-auditing system that prized accuracy, or if it reveals a bureaucracy rife with initial errors, corner cutting, and even potential fraud that then had to be covertly fixed. Does a scraped slip show a clerk diligently correcting an honest mistake, or covering up the early traces of embezzlement? When you look at a perfectly repaired slip, can you see integrity, or guilt? As you put your own knife away after a successful salvage operation, you feel the weight of that ambiguity. You know your own heart was pure, just a clumsy brush stroke. But the next clerk over, sweating as he scrapes away a 10 to replace it with a 5 in a grain ledger, who knows? The knife grants the power to fix history, but it can't tell us the intent behind the fix. You smooth the corrected slip, align it with its companions, and prepare to bind them. The incident is over. The knife rests on your desk, its small blade reflecting the lamplight. It is a humble, vital tool of truth, and of its malleability. In your hands, it maintains the official reality. And with that reality secured for now, you pick up your brush again, dipping it into the ink with a little more caution this time. The work, like the surface of a well-scraped slip, must go on. The individual slips are written, checked, and corrected. Now, they must become something greater. A loose stack of slips is vulnerable to disorder, to loss, to tampering. Your next task is to assemble them into a fixed, authoritative unit. You are not just a writer or a filer, you are a binder. This is where the document earns its permanence and its portability. You gather the slips for a single report, ensuring they are in the exact, correct sequence. The first slip often acts as a title page, stating the document's subject, origin, and date. You tap the bottoms on your desk to create a perfectly flush edge. Now, you take your awl, a sharp, pointed tool, about a centimeter from the left edge of the bundle, sometimes the right, but consistency within an office is key. You punch a clean hole through the entire stack. The bamboo is tough. It takes pressure and a twisting motion. You do this once, or for longer documents, twice. The holes are your anchors. Next, you take a length of strong hemp or silk cord. You thread it through the hole from the front, pull it tight around the back of the bundle, and bring it back through to the front. For a two-hole binding, you create a simple figure-8 pattern. The goal isn't a fancy knot, it's security and the ability to be unbound by an authorized reader. You tie it off with a firm, flat knot. The bundle is now a CE, a volume. It has a spine of cord and a body of bamboo. It can be picked up, rolled, and shelved without fear of its contents spilling into chaos. But some documents are meant to be read sequentially, like a calendar or a continuous register. For these, you use a different technique, the mat or weave binding. Here, you lay the slips side by side, face up, in order. Then, using 2 or more cords, you weave them over and under the slips at the top and bottom, lashing them together into a fixed, fan-like panel. This can be rolled from one end to the other for reading, but the slips' relationship to each other is permanently locked. It's a precursor to the later Chinese scroll. This method is for reference works, things that need to be consulted in order, where the integrity of the sequence is everything. Your hands perform these tasks so often they could do them in the dark. The feel of the cord, the resistance of the bamboo, the final tightening that signals completion. The mainstream historical importance of this binding is profound. It transformed information from a pile into an object. A bound CE could be sealed. You could press a dollop of clay over the knot and stamp it with an official seal, creating a tamper-evident lock. If the seal was broken, you knew the document had been opened. This made records legally trustworthy. A bound volume could also be sent. Couriers would carry satchels of these bamboo books across the empire, the cords ensuring they arrived intact. The physical act of binding was the act of finalizing, of certifying, of releasing information into the administrative bloodstream. It's why we have complete documents today, because they were bound and buried as units. The cords themselves tell a story. While hemp was common, silk cord was used for more important documents. Archaeologists can sometimes find the ghostly impressions of these cords left in the clay seals or see the mineralized remains. But here's the strange part. Analysis of some cord remnants has shown traces of dyes, faint reds or blues. This suggests that in some offices, they may have used colored cords to code different types of documents at a glance. Red for urgent military dispatches? Blue for permanent legal archives? It's a system of organization that has completely faded, leaving only a chemical whisper. Your hands might be tying a simple brown hemp cord today, but somewhere in the imperial capital, a clerk might be securing an edict with a vibrant red silk thread, a silent shout of importance. This leads to a quiet but persistent scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the standardization of binding methods, two-hole versus weave, left edge versus right edge, was enforced by central decree or simply emerged as regional best practices that slowly spread. Was there a Han Dynasty manual of administrative style that specified the knot type, or did every county magistrate's office develop its own quirky tradition, leading to a baffling variety for modern excavators to decipher? As you tie off your bundle with the same knot your supervisor taught you, you're probably not wondering about its imperial pedigree. You just know it holds. But that very act, repeated millions of times across the empire, is either a sign of rigid control or of organic, convergent evolution towards a good solution. The debate is knotted as tightly as your cord. You place the newly bound volume on the outgoing stack. It feels solid, purposeful. It started as a pile of raw slips, became a series of inked statements, and is now a single, coherent thing. You've given it a physical form that the Empire recognizes. It's ready to be sealed, sent, or filed. You wipe a bit of bamboo dust from your hands and look at the next waiting stack of loose slips. The cycle continues. From chaos, you create order. From order, you create an object. From that object, the dynasty governs. You finish the last slip of a report, blow gently on the ink to dry it, and lay it on the growing stack. Now comes the second part of the grind, one that tests your body as much as the writing taxed your mind, moving them. A completed set of documents, say, the monthly personnel report for your 100-man garrison, isn't a sheaf of paper. It's a stack of 30 or 40 bamboo slips. You gather them, aligning the edges neatly. Even this small bundle has a satisfying, solid heft in your hand, like a thin wooden brick. This is the basic unit of your world. But that's just one report. The real weight reveals itself when you have to file it. Your archive is not a library with airy shelves. It's a low, secure room, often partially underground or built with thick walls to regulate temperature and humidity. Along the walls are shelves, but more commonly, there are piles. Bundles of slips, each tied with cord, are stacked like lumber. To add a new bundle to a pile, you must first lift the ones on top. A full bundle of 100 slips can weigh over 2 kilograms. A stack of 10 such bundles is a back-straining lift. You are not a scribe now, you are a warehouse laborer. You bend your knees, get a good grip on the coarse cords, and heave. Dust, ancient and dry, puffs into the air, making you cough. The physicality is constant. Retrieving a record from 6 months ago means excavating it, bundle by heavy bundle. And the space. Oh, the space. Every slip, every bundle, occupies 3-dimensional volume. A major administrative center's archive wasn't just a room, it was a cavernous hall filled with these wooden blocks of data. You don't walk through aisles, you navigate narrow canyons between teetering pillars of imperial memory. The air is still and smells of old wood, dust, and the faint, tangy scent of the insect-repelling herbs strewn in the corners. Light is precious and kept dim to reduce fire risk, so you squint at the tags hanging from bundles to find the one you need. It's a claustrophobic's nightmare. A mainstream historical fact we must confront is that the Han bureaucracy eventually produced so many records that it created its own existential storage crisis. Emperors would occasionally order weeding, the selective destruction of older, deemed non-essential records, just to make physical space for the new ones. You are literally drowning in information made manifest. This leads to the constant battle against entropy. A bundle stored on a damp floor will wick moisture. The bamboo will swell, then contract, cracking. Mold can bloom in the beautiful, subtle patterns of decay that will eat the characters right off the surface. Then there are the insects. Silverfish and bookworms don't care if the material is bamboo or papyrus. It's delicious cellulose. You learn to spot the telltale pinprick holes and the fine, powdery frost that means a colony is munching its way through a year's tax records. Your preservation techniques are physical and aromatic. You regularly rotate bundles, moving those from the bottom of a pile to the top. You use storage chests made of fragrant, insect-repelling woods like camphor or cedar when you can get it. You place packets of pungent herbs, mugwort, chrysanthemum, maybe some pepper, among the stacks. The archive doesn't smell like a museum. It smells like a spice shop fighting a losing battle against a lumberyard. Some of the most valuable finds for modern archaeologists are the discarded slips. When a bundle's cord broke and slips scattered, or when a record was officially weeded, the old, useless slips weren't just thrown away. Bamboo was a resource. They were often recycled as fuel, or as scrap wood for minor repairs. But sometimes, they were used as toilet paper, or more accurately, as personal hygiene sticks, known as cho. Archaeologists have to carefully distinguish between a historically significant administrative slip and a 2,000-year-old piece of scratchy bathroom material. It's the ultimate, humbling end for a piece of imperial data, from recording the emperor's decree to ensuring a soldier's posterior is clean. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of recycled slips in ancient latrine pits represents a deliberate, symbolic destruction of old authority or is just the simplest case of pragmatic reuse of available scrap wood. As you lug another bundle onto a high shelf, your muscles screaming, you might find the latter explanation perfectly reasonable. The weight of history isn't metaphorical here. It's in your aching arms, the dust in your lungs, and the very real fear that the whole precarious pile might choose today to give in to gravity. Amid the crushing monotony of registers and inventories, you occasionally find a slip that doesn't fit. The handwriting is less formal, the phrasing more colloquial, the content utterly, beautifully personal. These are the letters. They weren't meant for archives, they were meant for hearts. They are fragile threads of human connection that somehow survived the winnowing of time, often because they were discarded, lost, or used as scrap. When you find one, the entire dusty, bureaucratic world around you fades, and you hear a voice. It might be a soldier stationed on the wind-scoured frontier, writing home. The official report you just copied spoke of troop strength and supply lines. His letter speaks of loneliness. To my elder brother, it begins. I am at the Juyen garrison. The weather here is bitterly cold, and the wind never stops. Please send me some padded winter clothes. If mother could make a new pair of socks, I would be most grateful. There is no poetry here, just a simple, aching need for warmth and a mother's care. He might include a few coins, asking for them to be passed to his wife, or inquire after the health of a child he has never met. The vast imperial project of walls and garrisons shrinks to the size of a man's cold feet and his worry for a family far away. Or it might be a plea. A low-ranking clerk, perhaps not unlike you, writes to a superior. But it's not about official business. It's a desperate request for a transfer or a promotion to a post with a slightly better salary. My family is large and our resources thin. My current stipend is insufficient. I respectfully beg for consideration. The tone is obsequious, laid with formal humility, but the fear beneath is raw and familiar. Another might be a complaint between colleagues, a slice of office politics preserved for 2 millennia. Clerk Jew is always shirking his share of the transcription duty, leaving the rest of us to work longer hours. Can you speak to him? The pettiness is eternal. These private letters are a mainstream historical treasure because they are unfiltered. They bypass the official voice of the state and give us the people who were the state. They reveal the social networks, the family structures, the economic anxieties, and the emotional landscape of the Han world in a way no edict ever could. They prove that behind every entry in a household register was a person who got cold, who worried about money, who gossiped about lazy co-workers. Some of the most touching finds are the practice letters or the failed correspondence. Archaeologists have found slips with the same opening line written over and over by a novice, a child or a new clerk learning how to structure a formal letter. To my most revered father, your unfilial son bows his head and writes, scrawled again and again, each attempt striving for the correct balance of respect and penmanship. Other slips are drafts, full of cross-outs and rewrites, as the sender struggled to find the right words for a difficult request or a delicate apology. These fragments show us literacy in action, the struggle to harness the powerful tool of writing for personal ends. They are the sweat and tears behind the elegant final product. This intimate view forces a complex scholarly debate into the open. Historians still argue whether the widespread ability to write personal letters among soldiers and low-level clerks indicates a surprisingly high level of grassroots literacy in Han society, or if it merely reflects the fact that the bureaucracy itself created a small, literate class whose personal communications just happened to be the ones that survived. Were you, a clerk who could pen a letter home, a rare exception, or were you part of a broader culture where writing for personal use was trickling down from the elite? When you find a lovingly penned letter from a simple soldier, does it mean many soldiers could write, or that he was uniquely fortunate to have had a clerk friend write it for him? The silence around that question is filled with the scratching of your own brush as you, perhaps, secretly draft a letter of your own after hours, adding your voice to the whispering chorus from the silence. You carefully set the personal slip aside from the official pile. For a moment, you are not just a functionary. You are a witness. The empire's greatness is measured in its grain stores and its armies, but its humanity is measured in these fleeting, fragile words: a request for socks, a worry about a mother's health, a brother's promise to send money. Then you take a deep breath, square your shoulders, and turn back to the ledger open before you. The next entry awaits: bolt of hemp cloth, inventory number 47, slight moth damage noted. The personal fades, the procedural resumes. But the echo of that voice, that human whisper from the dust, lingers in the quiet room. The enemies are silent, patient, and relentless. They do not carry swords or spears. They are moisture, mold, insects, and time itself. Your battle to preserve the records is a constant, low-grade war fought in the dim archives, and you are losing it by fractions of a millimeter every day. You are the guardian of memory against entropy, and your tools are ritual, vigilance, and a small arsenal of ancient preservatives. Your first foe is damp. Bamboo is hygroscopic. It drinks moisture from the air. In a damp environment, it swells. Then, when the air dries, it contracts. This repeated swelling and shrinking creates stress fractures, tiny hairline cracks that spiderweb across the surface, breaking the inked characters into illegible fragments. Worse, dampness invites mold. You've seen it. A slip left too long on a stone floor first develops a faint, fuzzy bloom of white or green. If unchecked, the mold's roots dig in, digesting the bamboo itself, leaving the surface pitted and stained, the ink eaten away. A mildewed legal document is a nullity. Your defense is airflow and elevation. Bundles are never stored directly on the earth floor. They rest on wooden shelves, often with gaps between the boards. You perform regular inspections, moving bundles from the bottom of a pile to the top to ensure even exposure to the dry air you work so hard to maintain. Then come the insects. The most dreaded is the bookworm, the larval stage of various beetles. You find their evidence before you see them: a neat, round hole drilled straight through a stack of slips, and a small pile of fine, talcum-like dust, the digested remains of your records. A single larva can tunnel through an entire year's worth of tax records, leaving a meandering trail of destruction. Your weapons here are aromatic. You scatter dried, crushed mugwort leaves between the bundles. Its pungent, sage-like scent is a repellent. Chrysanthemum flowers, when in season, are laid among the stacks. In more important archives, storage boxes are made from the resinous, fragrant wood of camphor or cedar. The archive smells like an apothecary's shop, a fragrant wall against the silent, chewing hordes. You also use physical traps, placing smooth, slippery pottery shards under shelf legs to block climbing insects, or ensuring no food is ever brought into the archive to attract them in the first place. Fire is the nightmare, the absolute end. A single overturned oil lamp, a stray ember from a brazier, and centuries of records vanish in a crackling roar. Because of this, open flames in the archive are strictly forbidden. Light comes from sealed lamps placed in wall niches or from the daylight you maximize with whitewashed walls. The very architecture is part of the preservation strategy. Thick walls to buffer temperature swings, high ceilings to let warm, moist air rise, and careful siting away from kitchens or workshops. This mainstream historical struggle had a formal name: Baozang, the art of protecting collections. It was a recognized duty. The Han Shu, Book of Han, records instances where officials were commended for the excellent preservation of their archives or reprimanded for letting them fall into decay. Your success in this invisible war was part of your professional evaluation. A well-kept archive was a sign of a well-run office. Some preservation methods bordered on the superstitious or alchemical. Recipes existed for special inks believed to be more durable or even insect repellent. Some texts mention washing slips in a solution of tannin from tree bark, a primitive preservative, or storing them with certain minerals like realgar, an arsenic sulfide, to deter pests, a dangerously ingenious solution. There are even suggestions that particularly precious documents were occasionally smoked not just to prepare the surface, but in rituals involving specific woods and incantations to imbue them with spiritual protection. Was it science or ceremony? For you, probably both. You'd try anything that worked. This constant battle raises a profound historical debate. Historians still argue whether the exceptional preservation of Han slips in places like the desert outposts of Jian is a happy accident of an arid climate, or a testament to the sophisticated, deliberate preservation techniques of the clerks themselves. Did these records survive despite being in a frontier garrison, or did they survive because the garrison's clerks, following strict central protocols, implemented preservation measures that were particularly effective in that dry environment? In other words, was there survival luck or skill? As you carefully rotate a bundle from a damp-looking corner of the room, sprinkling a fresh handful of crushed mugwort as you go, you are betting on skill. But a part of you knows that the dry desert wind outside, which cracks your own lips and chaps your hands, is your greatest, if uncredited, ally in keeping the memory of this place intact. You finish your rounds, your nose full of the scent of herbs and old wood. The archives are quiet, the bundles sleeping in their aromatic beds. For now, the enemies are held at bay. But you know they are always there, in the still air, in the unseen eggs laid in a crack, in the next season of rains. Your vigilance is a prayer against oblivion, written not in ink, but in the daily, mundane acts of care. Centuries collapse. The dry desert wind that once cooled your face as you walked the Jian ramparts now blows over ruins. The archive roof has long since caved in, buried by sand and time. You are no longer a Han clerk. You are an archaeologist, kneeling in the dust of the 20th or 21st century, your tools a fine brush, a small trowel, and numbered bags. Your task is no longer to create records, but to resurrect them from the silence. You see a darker patch in the soil, a concentrated layer of organic decay. Your heart quickens. This is a midden, a trash pit, and for you, it's a treasure trove. Because that's where they threw the broken, obsolete, or discarded slips. You begin to excavate, not with force, but with infinite patience. The first slip you uncover is a fragment, barely 2 inches long, covered in hard-baked mud. You gently lift it, place it in a padded tray. The next is in worse shape, cracked, its characters faded. But as you clear more earth, you find them, dozens, then hundreds of slips, tangled together in a confused mass, their binding cords long since rotted to dust. They are a jigsaw puzzle from a box that has been shaken violently for 2,000 years. Your goal is not just to find them, it is to read them. And to read them, you must first reconstruct their original order. This is where your modern mind engages in a profound dialogue with the ancient clerk's habits. You look for clues. Some slips have notches or holes in consistent positions. These were part of the same binding. You group them. You examine the handwriting. The same clerk's distinctive goose-tail flick might appear on a series of fragments. You group those. You look for sequential content, a number that increases, a list of names that follows a pattern, a date that progresses. It is detective work of the highest order. A mainstream historical triumph of this process is the reconstruction of entire legal cases, military campaigns, and economic ledgers from these scattered fragments. From a pit of what was essentially administrative garbage, scholars have rebuilt the daily life of a garrison, the correspondence of its officers, and the complaints of its soldiers. It is a miracle of patient scholarship. You work in a lab now, under bright lights. The fragments are cleaned with soft brushes and sometimes with careful applications of moisture to loosen centuries of grime. Infrared photography is your magic spell. The carbon-based ink, invisible to the naked eye on a heavily stained or charred slip, often glows with startling clarity under infrared light. A slip that looks like a blank, dirty piece of wood suddenly reveals 2 columns of pristine clerical script. It's like hearing a voice speak from the grave. You photograph, transcribe, and catalog. Each slip gets a number. GN number 12345. Its position in the pit is recorded, its dimensions measured, every character and blemish noted. It is being given a new, digital life before it crumbles any further. The slips that don't fit. You'll have what seems like a perfect sequence, a roster of names from A to L, and then you'll find a slip with a name starting with M that has the same handwriting and notch placement, but its content is a grocery list. Or you'll find 2 slips that were clearly bound together, but one is a formal report and the other is a personal letter. This reveals the ancient, practical recycling of materials. A clerk, needing a slip in a hurry, might grab an old, obsolete document, scrape it clean-ish, and reuse the other side. So what you're excavating is a palimpsest, a lagged text. The ghost of the first writing might linger under the new, or the slip might have been snapped in 2, with one half reused and the other half discarded. Your puzzle has pieces from different boxes mixed together. This painstaking work fuels a delicate and important scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the picture we get from these reconstructed archives is representative of the whole Han bureaucratic system, or a distorted snapshot. After all, we are largely digging up frontier garrisons and local offices, the periphery. Their paperwork might have been messier, more improvisational, than the pristine, theoretically perfect systems of the central government in Chang'an. Are we studying the rule, or the exception? Are the chaos, corrections, and personal letters we find the reality of Han administration everywhere, or just the reality of its far-flung, under-resourced edges? As you try to fit a warped slip about missing saddle blankets into a sequence about grain taxes, you feel the weight of that question. You are reconstructing a world from its discarded fragments, and you can never be entirely sure if you're looking at a broken masterpiece or a very accurate picture of a system that was always a little bit broken. You finally piece together a small, complete document, a request for leave from a soldier named Feng. It's only 5 slips. But in those 5 slips, you have a name, a rank, a reason, a date, and a superior's approving seal impression. A person, however faint, steps out of the dust. You lean back, a smile touching your lips. The ancient clerk filed this request, then likely threw it in the trash once it was approved and executed. His act of discarding was your act of discovery. The circle is closed. You place the reconstructed sequence in its special case, a modern box for an ancient bundle, and turn back to the tray. There are 1,000 more fragments waiting to tell their story. You return to your hand desk, the archaeologist's careful hands replaced once more by the clerk's stained fingers. But the perspective has shifted. You now see the system from within, groaning under its own success. The archives are overflowing. Every month, every year, the tide of bamboo rises. New bundles are stacked on top of old ones, shelves bow, and the narrow canyons between piles grow tighter. You face a crisis of plenty. The empire's memory is becoming so vast it threatens to collapse under its own weight. You are not just a keeper of records anymore. You are a curator of an ever-expanding, physical database with severe space limitations. And you have orders. The orders come down periodically from the capital or the commanding governor. Weed the archives. Shan Chu. It sounds innocuous, like gardening. It is not. It is the systematic, deliberate destruction of memory. You are tasked with reviewing older records and determining which are non-essential and can be discarded to make room for the new. The criteria are vague. Often, it's based on age. Records over a certain number of years old, unless they are of permanent legal significance like land deeds or major treaties, are condemned. But you hold in your hand a bundle of personnel reports from 20 years ago. They contain the service records of men who may now be dead, or veterans living out their days in a village. Is this essential? To the state, perhaps not. To a family proving a hereditary military obligation or a pension claim, it is everything. Your knife, once a tool for correction, now has a darker potential. You begin the grim triage. Some bundles are simply reused. You untie them, select slips that are blank on the reverse or only lightly written, and scrape them clean for new use. This is recycling, pragmatic and common. But for bundles deemed truly obsolete, the end is more final. Some are burned. You carry armfuls to a designated pit and watch as the careful clerical script blackens, curls, and vanishes into smoke and ash. The heat warms your face. It feels like a kind of murder. Other bundles are broken up and discarded into trash middens, the very pits future archaeologists will cherish. The cords are cut, the slips scattered, mixed with broken pottery, food scraps, and other refuse. A tax record from the reign of Emperor Wu becomes landfill, buried under the daily detritus of the garrison. This practice of controlled destruction is a mainstream historical reality that explains a great deal. It's why we don't have complete archives from the heart of the empire in Chang'an. They were periodically weeded and cleared. The records that survive in places like Jian often did so precisely because they were on the frontier, where the weeding may have been less rigorous, or because they were thrown into trash pits and preserved by the very act of being buried in stable, dry conditions. The empire was selective in its memory. It chose to remember foundational laws and recent logistics, while letting the granular detail of past decades fade away. You are an agent of that selective forgetting. It created a market. Discarded, blank or scraped slips were valuable as scrap material. But sometimes, entire bundles that were supposed to be destroyed were instead pilfered and sold. There is evidence from other periods of a black market in old administrative documents, which could be reused for fraud or for packaging goods. A merchant might wrap his wares in a scraped clean slip that once held a troop movement order. The imperial word, stripped of its meaning, becomes humble packing paper. It's a dizzying demotion. You might be weeding a bundle today, and see that same bamboo next week being used to patch a hole in a stable wall. This necessity of destruction forces a philosophical historical debate into the open. Historians still argue whether this weeding represents a pragmatic, necessary administrative tool for a pre-paper society, or if it was a form of historical censorship, a way for the state to actively shape the official past by physically erasing inconvenient or contradictory records from earlier reigns. Was it just a space issue, or was it a power issue? When you burn a bundle of complaints from a disgraced official's tenure, are you making room, or are you airbrushing history? As you carry another armful of doomed slips toward the fire, the question burns in your mind alongside the bamboo. You are not just a clerk. You are a gatekeeper of history, deciding, on vague orders, what gets to continue into the future and what turns to smoke. The work leaves your hands dirty and your spirits low. You return to the archive, now with a little more free space on a shelf. It feels hollow. You place a new, current bundle in the cleared spot. It is fresh, its ink dark, its cord tight. It represents the present, insisting on its place. You know its fate. In 20 years, some future clerk, just as tired as you are now, will hold it, judge it, and likely consign it to the flames or the midden. The cycle is endless: creation, storage, judgment, destruction. You pick up your brush to record today's events, the raw material for tomorrow's difficult choices. The system devours itself to keep living. In the quiet of the archive, amidst the smell of dust and mugwort, a different kind of debate hums, one you can't hear, but which will rage in university halls 2,000 years hence. It's a debate about you, your work, and what it all means. The bamboo slips are not just sources of facts, they are a Rorschach test for historians. One scholar looks at your meticulously kept ledgers, your standardized script, your complex filing system, and sees a terrifyingly efficient, hyper-organized modern state born centuries too early. Another scholar looks at the same pile and sees the frantic, patchwork efforts of an overstretched administration barely keeping the chaos at bay. So, what is the truth you are living? Is it order, or is it chaos? The efficient empire camp points to the evidence of system. The very existence of millions of nearly identical slips, from the deserts to the river valleys, speaks to incredible standardization. The clerks were trained, probably from a central curriculum. The reporting formats, headings, date placement, witness lists, are consistent. The use of seals, tags, and binding protocols shows a deep concern for authentication and chain of custody. The mathematical precision of the inventories suggests auditing was not just possible but expected. From this perspective, you are a cell in a vast, well-coordinated organism. The Han state knew, with startling accuracy, what it owned and who owed it service. This bureaucratic machine built roads, mobilized armies of hundreds of thousands, and collected taxes that funded monumental projects. Your wrist-aching labor was the literal writing of imperial power, and it worked. This is a mainstream, compelling narrative of Han's strength. But the chaotic reality camp leans in, points a finger at the cracks, and whispers, "Look closer." They see your corrections, the scraped slips. They see the personal letters mixed in with official reports, a sign of messy, multi-purpose workspaces. They see the recycling of old slips, which implies resource scarcity even for the bureaucracy. They see the variations in handwriting and formatting from one commandee to another, suggesting local adaptation, not blind obedience to a central manual. They read the plaintive letters from soldiers begging for socks and the complaints about bad ale, and they argue this reveals a system that was often indifferent, inefficient, or broken at the human level. The state might have known it had 9,877 arrowheads, but did it know Private Zhong's feet were freezing? From this angle, you are not a cog in a perfect machine, but an overworked human trying to impose a semblance of order on an inherently messy human world, using a system that was impressive mostly in its ambitious attempt, not its flawless execution. The error slips. These are slips where a clerk, perhaps exhausted, made a hilariously obvious mistake and then corrected it. One famous example is a slip where a clerk began writing a date, got the reign year wrong, scraped it, and wrote the right one. But the correction itself is wrong in a different way. Or slips where numbers are so wildly off, recording 1,000 horses where there were only 10, that they had to be entirely redone. The efficiency scholars say these prove the system had self-correcting mechanisms. Errors were found and fixed. The chaos scholars say these prove the system was staffed by tired, error-prone humans and the data was often unreliable. The same slip tells two stories. This is the core debate that historians still argue over. Did the bamboo slip bureaucracy represent the height of pre-modern administrative rationalism, or was it a grandiose, paper-thin, or rather, bamboo-thin, facade that barely managed a sprawling, diverse empire? Was it the engine of Han greatness, or merely the exhaust fumes of its ambition? As you grind your ink for the 1000th time, you are the living answer, and you contain both truths. You feel the weight of the system's expectations, the need for perfect, uniform records. And you also feel the ache in your back, the draft from the door, the knowledge that the cord on that bundle over there is about to break. You are both the ideal and the reality, the perfect clerical script and the accidental ink blot. You file away a completed report. It is neat, accurate, and perfectly bound. It is a tiny monument to order. You then turn and see a junior clerk frantically scraping a major mistake from a requisition form, his face a mask of panic. That is the reality of chaos. The two exist side by side in the same dusty room. The debate isn't about which one is true, it's about which one you choose to see as the defining characteristic. For the empire to function, the fiction of perfect order had to be maintained, even if every clerk in every outpost knew the daily struggle to uphold it. You are living in the tense, creative, exhausting space between the ideal system and the inevitable mess. And that, perhaps, is the most human truth the bamboo has to tell. A new material arrives. It is not bamboo. It is not wood. It is thin, flexible, and frighteningly light. At first, it is a curiosity, a luxury item for the very wealthy or for special ceremonial purposes. You see a visiting official from the capital unroll a scroll of it, a continuous sheet covered in elegant calligraphy. It seems to glow softly in the lamplight. They call it paper. You watch as he rolls and unrolls it with one hand, a motion that would require you to gather and tie 50 bamboo slips. A cold trickle of understanding runs down your spine. This changes everything. Paper, as you come to learn, is made from a pulp of rags, hemp, tree bark, or old fishnets, materials far more plentiful and easier to process than splitting and fire-treating bamboo. It can be made in sheets of almost any size. You can write a long treatise on a single, continuous roll. You can fold it. Most devastatingly, you can store a volume of text that would fill a basket of bamboo slips in a space no larger than your hand. The physical tyranny of your world, the weight, the bulk, the sheer volume of information, is suddenly rendered obsolete. The revolution is quiet, but its implications are tectonic. The Han Dynasty is credited with the early development and adoption of paper, a mainstream historical fact that marks the beginning of the end for your entire profession's way of life. At first, paper is used alongside bamboo. Important, permanent records might still be committed to slips for their perceived durability and gravitas. Day-to-day drafts, personal correspondence, and poetry migrate to paper quickly. You might find yourself using a paper scrap for a quick calculation or a memo, appreciating its convenience even as you feel a traitor to the bamboo that has been your life. The transition is generational. Older clerks grumble that paper is fragile, that it tears, that it is vulnerable to damp and insects in different ways. They are not wrong. But the younger apprentices, who never developed the muscles for hauling bamboo bundles, see only the future. They embrace the lightness. Some of the earliest paper documents we have are, ironically, found because they were used to wrap or stuff other things. A precious object might be wrapped in a scrap of paper that had a discarded draft of a report on it. A ceremonial sword scabbard might be lined with paper fragments. So, the very fragility and disposability of paper led to its preservation in accidental ways, much like the discarded bamboo slips in trash pits. Paper began its life as a premium product, but its destiny was to become the ultimate disposable medium, a complete reversal of the bamboo slip's journey from raw material to permanent record. This monumental shift ignites a subtle but profound historical debate. Historians still argue whether the invention of paper was a primary cause of intellectual and bureaucratic expansion in the later Han and subsequent dynasties, or merely an enabler that responded to a demand that was already there. Did paper allow ideas to spread and bureaucracy to grow because it was cheap and easy? Or did a society already bursting with literate people and complex administration desperately seek a better medium, thus spurring the innovation? In other words, was paper the spark, or the kindling? As you hold your first sheet, feeling its alien lightness, you are standing at that crossroads. Your aching back votes for it being a miraculous solution to a physical problem. But the part of you that knows the empire's insatiable hunger for records suspects the hunger came first, and this is just a better way to feed it. You look around your archive. The canyons of bamboo seem different now, not like a fortress of knowledge, but like a relic. A museum of a heavier age. The work continues, of course. Bamboo slips are still produced by the thousands. But a whisper is in the air, a sense of sunset. The skills you have honed, splitting, scorching, scraping, binding heavy bundles, are becoming the skills of a past era. The future writes with a lighter touch, on a surface that flies rather than anchors. There is a melancholy to it. You have devoted your life to mastering the bamboo, to wrestling its physicality into submission to serve the word. Now, the word is finding a way to escape that physicality altogether. You finish your shift, placing a final bamboo-bound volume on its shelf. You blow out your lamp. In the darkness, the archives feel like a forest, a silent, wooden forest of frozen information. You know that outside, in the workshops of the capital, they are stirring vats of pulp, pressing them into sheets, and hanging them to dry. A quieter, lighter, more prolific memory is being born. Your world of weight and heft is passing. You walk out, closing the heavy door behind you, leaving the bamboo to its long, slow conversation with the dust. Time folds in on itself once more. You are in a clean, climate-controlled laboratory in the 21st century, but the ghosts of the Han clerks are with you, not in the dust now, but in the cool glow of a monitor. The very latest chapter in the life of the bamboo slip is being written not with ink, but with light. The enemy is no longer mold or fire, but digital oblivion. And the savior is a partnership between the world's oldest artificial intelligence, human curiosity, and its newest, machine learning. The process begins with the most exquisite, high-resolution digital photography. Each slip, whether a pristine fragment or a stained, broken shard, is captured from every angle under different light spectra: normal, infrared, ultraviolet. These images create a perfect, immortal digital twin, safe from physical decay. But then the real magic starts. Scholars and computer scientists have begun feeding these thousands of images into AI models. The AI is trained to recognize patterns, the stroke order of clerical script, the shape of particular characters, the way cracks tend to form, even the unique handwriting of individual scribes based on the pressure and angle of their brushstrokes. Its task is to see what the human eye, tired from years of staring at fragments, might miss. The first miracle is reassembly. You have a box of 500 fragments from a single trash pit, a jumble that would take a human researcher years to sort. The AI, however, can analyze them in moments. It compares the handwriting, the wood grain patterns at the break edges, the ink color, and the content. It begins to propose matches. Fragment number 347 likely connects to the left side of fragment number 12. Fragments number 88, number 211, and number 455 share statistical similarities in script and probably belong to the same document. It doesn't give answers. It gives profoundly educated guesses, shrinking decades of work into days. It is the ultimate, patient archaeological assistant, working at the speed of light. The second miracle is reading the unreadable. A slip is charred from an ancient fire, its surface blackened, the ink invisible. Under infrared, a faint ghost appears, but it's blurred, like a whisper in a storm. The AI, trained on thousands of clear examples of the same characters, can analyze the faintest pixel variations and infer what the character most likely is. It can digitally clean the image, separating the background noise from the signal of the ink. It can even suggest completions for broken characters, like the most sophisticated autocorrect in history, trained on a 2,000-year-old language. Suddenly, documents given up as lost are whispering their secrets again. The mainstream historical impact is staggering. Lost legal codes, unknown poems, detailed astronomical records, all are emerging from the darkness, not because we dug them up anew, but because we finally have the eyes to see what was always there. The data from these slips is now often stored using technologies that, in their own way, echo the Han system. The digital tags and metadata attached to each slip image, the find location, material, date, proposed content, are the direct descendants of the wooden tags you once carved and tied. The complex relational databases that link a soldier's name from a personnel slip to his personal letter and his equipment record are the spiritual successors of your filing system, infinitely more powerful but born of the same impulse: to connect, to categorize, to make knowledge retrievable. The Han clerks were building a physical internet of information. We are giving that internet a digital, eternal soul. This brave new world of silicon and algorithms births its own gentle debate. Historians and technologists still argue whether the use of AI in reconstruction risks creating a plausible past rather than revealing the true past. If an AI infers a missing character, are we reading history, or are we reading a statistically probable version of history generated by a machine? Where does restoration end and invention begin? It's a debate about the integrity of the source, echoing the ancient clerk's own struggle with his knife between correction and falsification. The goal is not to replace the scholar's intuition, but to augment it with a tool of unimaginable power, creating a dialogue between human insight and machine precision. You look from the screen, displaying a perfectly reassembled digital scroll of a Han land contract, back to the actual bamboo fragment lying in its tray under the camera. The journey is complete. It began with an axe in a forest, moved through the smoke of preparation, the ache of the scribe's wrist, the weight in the archivist's arms, the chaos of the discard pit, the patience of the excavator's brush. Now, it ends here, in a silent hum of servers, where the information is finally liberated from the fragile, heavy, beautiful bamboo that bore it for 2 millennia. The record has outlived the empire that created it, the clerks who wrote it, and the very medium it was written on. It has achieved a kind of permanence its authors could never have dreamed of. The work of the Han clerk, to record, to order, to preserve, has found its ultimate expression in the digital age, a testament to the unbroken human chain of memory that stretches from a strip of fire-treated bamboo to a stream of pure, weightless light. The story of the bamboo slips slows now, like a great will coming to rest. The frantic scratch of the brush, the heft of the bundles, the debates of scholars, all these sounds soften and blend into a gentle hum, a memory of diligent effort. You have walked with those clerks, felt the grain of the bamboo under your thumb, smelled the acrid smoke of its preparation, and shared the quiet satisfaction of a bundle perfectly bound and tagged. You have also felt the weight of their world, the literal, physical burden of memory in an age before light. But see how it turns? That weight, so solid and imposing, has been transmuted. It has become light, first on paper, then on screen. The struggle against decay, fought with herbs and careful storage, is now fought with photons and algorithms. The essence of what those clerks did, capturing a moment, a transaction, a plea, has flown free of its wooden cage. It is no longer trapped in a dusty archive. It floats in a shared realm of knowledge, accessible across continents in a heartbeat. So let the image of those silent, stacked bundles fade. In their place, picture the characters they held, not black on golden bamboo, but glowing softly on a screen in a dark room, connecting a curious mind in our time to a diligent hand in theirs. The clerk's duty is finally, fully complete. The record is safe. The memory endures. Now, let your own mind grow quiet. Let the echoes of ancient administration, the grind of ink, the shuffle of slips, recede into a pleasant, distant murmur. Feel the comfortable weight of your blankets, the gentle rise and fall of your breath. The journey through the archives is over. The work is done. All is preserved. All is well. Let sleep pull you gently into its own silent, perfect archive of dreams.